There's a certain level of discipline that, well, it actually makes people look at you with a kind of fear. It's this consistency that's so relentless, so completely unbreakable, that it almost doesn't seem human. So today, we're going to break down the ancient system that creates exactly that. Let's dive in.
Come on, you know exactly who I'm talking about, right? That one person, while everyone else's New Year's resolutions have totally crashed and burned by like the third week of January, this person, they just keep going. We're all making excuses, and they just show up. Day in, day out. And you can't help but just stand there and wonder, how on earth do they do it?
Well, the answer lies in this fascinating concept from Zen monks called Gyoji. It literally means the practice that perpetuates itself. And look, this isn't about some simple habit-building trick you read on a blog. No, Gyoji is a full-on system for forging a will that is absolutely unbreakable. Trust me, once you get how this works, you are never going to look at a goal the same way again.
So, to really get our heads around this, we need a story. Let's talk about this programmer, a guy named Raphael. Super brilliant, totally successful in his career. But he had this one fatal flaw. He just couldn't stick to anything. The gym, meditation, reading, you name it, nothing ever lasted more than a couple of weeks.
Does that cycle sound a little too familiar? Yeah, that was Raphael's entire life. He'd kick off a new routine on Monday with all this motivation just on fire. But then, by Wednesday, his mind would start whispering those little negotiations. Hey, you're tired. Maybe just skip today. By Friday, it was a complete surrender, followed by those empty promises to start again next week. He was absolutely trapped.
See, Raphael was fighting this internal battle that honestly he was always going to lose. Why? Because he didn't understand the real rules of the game. And then he stumbled upon the secret of the Zen monks, and it all started with one single, kind of terrifying step, making a public vow.
Okay, get this. At the Ihei Temple in Japan, a bell is rung at 3:30 in the morning, every single day, since the year 1200. And every single day, the monks get up. Not 3:25, not 3:35. The question of, should I get up? It just doesn't even exist in their minds. That right there is the core of Gyoji. Continuous practice, with zero gaps. The debate is over before it even has a chance to start.
All right, here's the absolute key to the whole thing. Your brain basically puts commitments into two different buckets. When a promise is private and, reversible, like saying, I'll try to meditate, it just flings the door wide open for endless mental negotiation. But when it's public and feels irreversible, your brain just treats it like a fact of life. It's not a choice anymore. It just happens.
And this is where it gets really powerful, because it's all about a massive shift in identity. When a monk takes his vows in front of the whole community, he's not just making a promise. No way. He is fundamentally changing who he is. Everyone witnesses it, that new identity solidifies, and that constant internal negotiation, it just ends for good.
So what did Raphael do? He did exactly that. He wrote down his vow, he signed it, and he posted it on social media for the whole world to see. He told his friends, his family, his coworkers, everyone. And just like that, failure wasn't just some private disappointment anymore. It was now a very public threat to his reputation. And let me tell you, our brains will do just about anything to avoid that kind of social humiliation.
Okay, so the public vow worked. It silenced that constant mental debate. But the internal war? Oh, that had just begun. See, his biology didn't give a rip about his online reputation. His body was still screaming for more sleep. And this is where the monk's second principle became absolutely critical. He picked 5 a.m. Now, why 5 a.m.? It wasn't because he was some chipper morning person. Far from it. It was because at 5 a.m., the world is asleep. There are no text messages, no emails, no distractions, nothing. The point wasn't to find the perfect time. The point was to pick a time so empty that it killed every single possible excuse to put it off.
But, of course, his clever mind found a new loophole, arguing about what he should do. Should I meditate first or read? So he just eliminated that choice too. He created this fixed, totally non-negotiable sequence. 20 push-ups, 10 minutes of meditation, 10 minutes of reading, always in that order. Same time, same order, every single day. He even gave it a name, the One Way.
And I'm not going to lie, those first few weeks were pure hell. His mind was just screaming for something new, for variety. But then, something started to shift. And here's the cool part. The science totally backs this up. Research on habit formation shows that after around 66 days of doing the same thing in the same way, a part of your brain called the basal ganglia, it's like your brain's autopilot, it takes over. And this is the whole point. When an action becomes automatic, it stops being a choice, it just becomes part of who you are. You're not deciding to do it anymore, you're just doing it.
So Raphael was on his way. He was crushing it. But then came the real test. You know, the part of the story where pretty much everyone else gives up. Real-world chaos. Getting sick, traveling, having guests over. How do you possibly maintain an unbroken chain when life itself is relentlessly trying to snap it in two? This, right here, is where we have to confront the biggest lie of all. The lie of all or nothing. We tell ourselves, well, if I can't do my full 20 minutes perfectly, I'll just skip it and do double tomorrow. Sound familiar? That kind of thinking is what creates the gaps. And a gap is the tiny crack where your old self crawls right back in. And the #1 rule of Gyoji? No. Gaps. And it's so important to understand the difference between a retreat and strategic rest. I mean, think about it. Elite athletes have rest days, right? But those days are intentional, they're strategic, they're a planned part of the system so they can train even harder tomorrow. Just skipping your practice because you don't feel like it? That's not rest. That's a retreat. It's an emotional surrender, and it's what kills all your momentum.
And Raphael's story just illustrates this perfectly. So on day 40, he had to fly clear across the country. What did he do? He did his push-ups in the airport bathroom. He meditated in the back of an Uber. I mean, was it perfect? No, but it wasn't zero, and that's the point. The chain remained unbroken. The practice continued.
You know, Zen monasteries have kept going for centuries, through wars, famines, you name it. How? Because the answers to the problems already exist. So Raphael just stole that strategy. He literally wrote down every single thing that could possibly get in his way and came up with a pre-solution for each one. If my kid gets sick, I will do this. If I have a hangover, I will do that. No thinking, no negotiating when the chaos hits. The decision is already made.
So, on day 90, Raphael did it. He completed his vow. But honestly, something way deeper had changed. It wasn't just that he'd built a new habit. He was a fundamentally different person. The practice itself had reshaped his entire identity, right from the ground up. And his friends? They noticed. They literally said to him, "Dude, your consistency is scary." And that's when he knew he'd actually arrived. When your discipline starts to make other people uncomfortable, that's how you know you're operating on a whole other level. Your very existence becomes proof that what they call impossible is really just uncomfortable.
And that really is the ultimate takeaway here. The Gyoji System, it's not about creating habits. It's a technology for forging a new identity. You stop being the person who tries to do things, and you become the person who simply is those things. You become the kind of person who just can't do it any other way.
So the final question is pretty powerful. This whole system, it requires the death of your inconsistent, excuse-making self and the rebirth of an unbreakable one. This isn't just about being a little bit better. It's about being fundamentally different. So, the real question is, are you ready for that?